north to south, coast to coast, around the world. This is the Wells Report. Greetings. My name is John David Wells. Happy Monday. As if there was such a thing. What do we do here? We report the news honestly and fairly. We analyze the news for fact and bias. We point out each. And we talk about both fact and bias. We also make commentary, which is not news. Commentary is opinion, yours and mine. And so we debate. News, analysis, commentary, and debate. This is the Wells Report. Thanks very much for being a part of our broadcast. We sincerely appreciate it more than you know. And off we go. There was a heart-squeezing moment for those people living in Washington, D.C. over the weekend. Federal investigators today hope to begin to unravel just exactly what happened regarding a private jet, scrambled F-16s, sonic booms, and the somewhat careful explanation of those three things. Federal investigators hope to begin to unravel the mystery of a private plane that flew into restricted airspace over the nation's capital. That happened yesterday. F-16s were scrambled, and they went supersonic. That means you got a sonic boom across Washington, D.C. that very likely unsettled a whole bunch of people. More about that coming up in just a couple of moments. The jet was intercepted by the F-16s, who fired flares to try to get the pilot's attention. Apparently, he was unresponsive. And the jet crashed into a Virginia forest with enough force to make it essentially unrecognizable except a piece of shredded metal and broken humans. A sonic boom from one of the jets startled residents across Washington and parts of Maryland and Virginia as the fighters pursued the unresponsive plane, firing off flares in an ill-fated effort to gain the pilot's attention. It was not clear why the plane veered off course. Loss of cabin pressure that could render the pilot and the passengers unconscious was a possibility, according to the plane owner. The Federal Aviation Administration said in a statement that the plane crashed into the mountainous terrain near rural Montebello in southwest Virginia around 3:30 p.m. No survivors were found. The NTSB will lead the investigation into the crash as they always do. U.S. Capitol Police officials said they were monitoring the unresponsive pilot along with federal partners as the plane flew nearby on Sunday afternoon. U.S. Capitol Complex was briefly placed on elevated alert until the airplane left the area. 6 jets from 3 locations were launched. F-16 fighters from the D.C. National Guard intercepted the Cessna 560 Citation 5 at about 3:20 p.m. The pilot never responded to attempts to establish communications, according to NORAD. The intercept caused the sonic boom heard across the Washington region around 3:10 p.m. This also, according to NORAD. F-16 fighter jets were authorized to travel at supersonic speeds. Officials in Bowie, Maryland, and the Annapolis Office of Emergency Management in Maryland said the sound was from an aircraft that had flown out of Joint Base Andrews. The plane took off from Elizabethton Municipal Airport in Elizabethton, Tennessee, bound for Long Island MacArthur Park Airport in New York, according to the FAA. The crash near Montebello, about 135 miles southwest of Washington, was flight tracked. The flight tracking sites showed the jet suffered a rapid spiraling descent, dropping at a rate of more than 30,000 feet per minute before crashing into the St. Mary's wilderness. Virginia State Police said officers were notified of the crash shortly before 4 p.m. It took rescuers on foot about 4 hours to reach the crash site. The tragedy goes like this. The Cessna was registered to Encore Motors. John Rumpel, who runs the company, told the New York Times that his daughter, 2-year-old granddaughter, her nanny, and the pilot were aboard the plane. They were returning to their home in East Hampton on Long Island after visiting his house in North Carolina. Rumpel, a pilot, said he hoped his family didn't suffer and suggested the plane could have lost pressurization. That is the same kind of accident that cost the life of golfer Payne Stewart in a Learjet some years ago. The incident brought back memories and here it is in the news article. The incident brought back memories of a Learjet that lost cabin pressure and flew aimlessly for miles with golfer Payne Stewart aboard before crashing into a pasture in South Dakota. 6 people died in that accident. President Joe Biden was playing golf with his brother. I just thought of something funny. Okay. I'm sorry. I thought of something funny as I read that particular article. I'll share it with you here in a second. Anyway, President Biden was playing golf with his brother at Joint Base Andrews around the time the fighter took off. Anthony Giuliani, a spokesperson for the U.S. Secret Service, said the incident had no impact on the president's movements on Sunday. A White House official said the sound of the boom was faint at the golf course. The president had been briefed on the crash. What I immediately thought of is that as soon as the president, probably hunkering over a putt, heard the boom, he probably looked up at his brother and said, "Oh, excuse me, I'm sorry. It must have been the eggs." I'm sorry. It's not something toilet humor is not something I normally mess with, but I just couldn't help it. It's just one of those things. This is the Wells Report. I want to thank you very much for being a part of this. Let's see. Oh, wow. That's interesting. Yeah. Isaac says this best. He says, "Good morning. It's a tragic story." It is. By the way, that's how the USA Today newspaper covered it. Fox News covered it this way. A loud noise similar to an explosion heard in the Washington, D.C. Metroplex area was the sonic boom of military aircraft scrambling to catch up to a Cessna aircraft with an unresponsive pilot before it crashed, killing all 4 people aboard. The City of Annapolis Office of Emergency Management reported the boom early on Sunday. It was, in fact, caused by an authorized Department of Defense flight. The noise was heard in areas as far east as the eastern shore of Maryland and as far west as Manassas, Virginia. That sound propagates. It's very much like thunder, and it propagates as it goes through the air, very much like a small wave through the ocean becomes a big wave. And that's why thunder, when you're really close to it, has this cracking sound, but miles away, it's a boom, so on and so on. The loud boom was heard across the DMV area. It was caused by an authorized DoD flight. This flight caused a sonic boom. That is all the information available at this time. Bowie, Maryland officials confirmed the sonic boom was from a plane out of Joint Base Andrews. The Continental U.S. North American Aerospace Defense Command, NORAD, said 2 F-16s out of the Air National Guard based near Atlantic City, New Jersey, and 2 out of the D.C. National Guard at Andrews Air Force Base responded to the Cessna over Washington, D.C. and Northern Virginia. In order to catch up with the plane, the jets were authorized to fly at supersonic speeds. The sonic boom came from the 2 F-16s out of Andrews. The civilian plane was intercepted at 3:20 p.m. Fighter pilots reported the pilot of the Cessna was unresponsive. NORAD said they also continued to try to establish contact with the Cessna pilot up until the plane crashed near the George Washington National Forest in Virginia. NORAD said the people on the ground may have seen flares used while trying to intercept the plane. The flares burn out quickly and completely, no danger to the people on the ground. According to federal FAA officials, a Cessna Citation took off from Elizabethton, Tennessee, bound for Islip, New York. It crashed at the sparsely populated town of Montebello, Virginia, around 3 p.m. 4 people on board. Virginia's state police officers said that search efforts began immediately by air and on foot with the Augusta County Sheriff's Office and Augusta County Fire Rescue after their notification at 3:50 p.m. Search efforts were suspended shortly before 8 p.m. on Sunday. First responders reached the crash site on foot, found no survivors. The Associated Press reported that the Cessna was registered to Encore Motors of Melbourne, Florida. John Rumpel, who runs the company, told the New York Times his daughter, 2-year-old granddaughter, her nanny, and the pilot were on the plane. Rumpel said they were returning to their home in East Hampton, New York, after visiting him in North Carolina. The Associated Press reached Barbara Rumpel, who is listed as president of Melbourne Incorporated, and she said she had no comment. Congressional sources told Fox News the U.S. Capitol went into air con on Sunday as officials tracked the aircraft when it pierced the no-fly zone in the capital region. Fox is told security officials at the Capitol briefly flipped the alert posture from green to yellow. Blue and red are higher levels of alert. When the latter is issued, the Capitol is evacuated. Officials told the Fox News organization that Capitol was on an elevated posture for a short time before determining the plane entered restricted airspace and that it was not a threat. In fact, officials also told Fox News the Capitol was never in any danger. White House officials said President Biden was briefed on the incident, adding the sound of the sonic boom was feigned at Andrews. Rumors began circulating around social media at about 3:15. The sound of a loud explosion heard across Washington, D.C. One user posted, "Did anyone feel that explosion in D.C.?" Another person responded, "All the way out in Prince George's area, too," referring to a nearby county in Maryland. Another Twitter user posted, "Do you feel like that was an explosion? I'm thinking sonic boom, but from what? I'm just south of Bowie. If you felt it, tell me where you did." A user on the eastern shore in Queen Anne's County, just across from Chesapeake, from Annapolis, reported the explosion. The hashtag explosion trended on Twitter Sunday afternoon as reports of the sound poured in. As the explosion dissipated, I heard a plane heading over the Chesapeake Bay, estimated altitude 25,000 feet with contrails. No reports. Did anyone hear this? I live on the eastern shore. It shook my house. I thought there was an explosion somewhere. Scary. Yeah, it was. By the way, there was also an immediate reply from NORAD and U.S. military officials that the plane was not shot down. And a lot of people, mainly conspiracy theorists, also were thinking, well, maybe that was. But defense officials, like I said, took great care to explain that the plane was not indeed shut down. And in that particular case, there's a situation brewing where you don't need to worry about that one way or another, in my view. Why do I say that? Well, because if you fly an airplane over Washington, D.C., or in the restricted airspace of Washington, D.C., there will be fighter jets that immediately come to intercept you. And if indeed you are unresponsive, or if indeed you make any kind of overt gesture of trying to escape or something like that, you will be shot down. And you should be shot down. In this particular case, those pilots are smart. They could figure out that pilot was not moving in the cockpit. They could figure out that pilot was, in other words, in extremis. It is a tragedy. It is a tragedy. And that tragedy is one that we've seen before. God bless the families. God bless the people that were frightened because of this sonic boom. Sonic booms were part and parcel of life where I grew up. In the high desert of Western America, we heard them all the time. But we haven't heard them for a long, long time. Because sonic booms essentially were rendered illegal because of the Concorde. And so I could see why a lot of people were extremely nervous and very frightened. This is the Wells Report. John David Wells at your service. Please stand by. We'll be back with more coming up in just a moment. This is the Wells Report, which will return in 3 minutes. This is the Wells Report, which will return in 2 minutes. You're listening to the Wells Report, which will return in 1 minute. The Wells Report returns in 30 seconds. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. This story out of Washington, D.C. is something that the U.S. government is suffering because of the political shenanigans that have been going on in that town for the last 10 years, 15 years. And the conspiracy idea that maybe the plane was shot down, that was actually intensified by the government trying to make sure that everybody knew it wasn't shot down. I don't think it was. To be perfectly honest with you, it doesn't add up that it would be. However, I never thought that anybody would think that anything besides two jumbo jets flying into the World Trade Center towers caused them to fall down. Yeah, but so conspiracy theories have a tendency to take on a life of their own. But a lot of this can be a situation where you sort of create the problem that you're trying to avoid by saying, no, we didn't shoot him down. Well, that's one way of handling it, I suppose. The other one is to say, while it is the clear policy of the United States military, when there is an incursion into United States restricted airspace over the Capitol building of the United States or anywhere close to it, if contact cannot be made immediately from the military assets being used to intercept that particular aircraft, it will be shot down immediately. That, however, did not happen in this case. That way you have a clear and understandable circumstance whereby people realize, gosh, that's probably a bad idea to fly an airplane over the Capitol complex without responding to either air traffic control or military jets flying around you shooting flares at you. Well, not that they shoot flares at you. Those are anti-aircraft flares that essentially provide a heat source that infrared missiles will track instead of the aircraft. So when you try to, say, for example, quell the idea that American military jets shot down a private aircraft, honestly, If you take evasive maneuvers around a military aircraft over the Capitol, they're going to shoot you down. Okay? It's an important safety tip. All right? So don't bait the bulldog when you start thinking about this stuff. The other thing about that is this is we have the most superb communications between ourselves that we've ever had. I grew up in an age where if you wanted to talk to somebody else, you could do it a couple of different ways. Either you could write a letter to the editor, or you could write a news story and get it published in the local newspaper, or you could do the same thing, put out a press release to the local television and radio stations, and so on and so on. Well, then you had to determine whether or not they would think it would be something worth publishing or something worth sharing, and either they would or they wouldn't. In today's world, there are many platforms where we can go and address the world. And we can do it instantaneously. And unfortunately, in some cases, without the benefit of the editorial process of somebody that knows you, for example, where you put something out there that is totally antithetical to what you might think, but you didn't realize what you were doing until it was too late. Not that I've done that myself. Anyway, that is a real benefit to civilization, to be able to talk to each other instantly. The control of that is something that we've all been discussing, and something that we really probably don't want to do. We don't want to control that communication. So what I'm trying to tell you is this. A lot of that conspiracy theory, conspiratorial ideas can be born out of simple communication in a free way. And that's good, not bad. This is the Wells Report. You're listening to the Wells Report, which will be back in 4 minutes. This is the Wells Report, which will return in 3 minutes. This is the Wells Report, which will return in 2 minutes. You're listening to the Wells Report, which will return in 1 minute. The Wells Report returns in 30 seconds. News, analysis, commentary, and debate. Welcome to the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Earlier today, we were talking politics on Twitter. I was just talking about how it's really cool to have a dialogue with billions of people around the world simply by turning on your phone, going to Twitter. It's amazing. These devices mean that we live in the future. It's walking around in an episode of Star Trek, for crying out loud. And so we were talking politics. and we were interacting on just exactly, what people are seeing and believing and so on and so on about leftist politics and how the left seems to be willing to impose whatever craziness of the moment pops through their head. It's not craziness because it's calculated. And in that conversation, I asked a question. And that was this: what has politics actually improved? And I'm interested in you answering that question. What has politics actually improved? Anything? I mean, I'm trying to figure that out. And I'm really perplexed by it. Because what we have endless examples of how politics has damaged this society, damaged our economy, damaged our otherwise good feelings about how we're governed in this nation. And I'm looking at this, and you know what I say when it comes to politics. Let me go over to the opinion camera. You know how I talk about we're electing the wrong people. How politics has proven itself to be incompetent, dangerous, expensive, counterproductive, and how people who practice politics as the center point of their life seek to impose that political understanding on everyone else. And indeed, in a scurrilous way, stomping on those who refuse to agree with their delusion of the moment. And all you got to do to discover that delusion is listen to what they say. And so, once again, it all comes down to the willingness to detach reality from politics. And as a political leading entity, the government of the United States wants to impose politics instead of reality. Well, that's how you screw up nations beyond repair. And boy, are we right in the middle of it. It's so bad. It is so bad. You can't send your kids to school without politics touching their lives. You can't even go to a department store without politics touching your lives. And the craziness of gigantic corporations willing to forsake their entire customer base for the sake of politics, I think proves the point that politics really doesn't contribute much to society except division and disaster, at least in this political phase, in this phase of our nation's history. So, again, please, by all means, explain to me what politics has actually done to improve our society and improve our lives. Okay? I actually, while I was saying that, could think of one thing. When I was younger, automotive technology was both chased as a matter of hobby and fun, and also was focused on one thing, at least in my particular context, and that was to make the engine in my car run as efficiently as possible. And so I spent hours and hours and hundreds, if not thousands of dollars making that engine run as efficiently as I possibly could. Well, as time went by, because of politics, expensive, we finally got machines that essentially tune themselves up 100 times a second. Now, that information's a little old. It may be more than that now. And I would have to spend at least once a week, working over the various adjustments on my car to make it run better. And that was once a week, and my car now tunes itself up 100 times a second. It's like, okay, so why am I bothering? And so we don't. So that is one thing. And by the way, the cars that we have now don't put out pollution. They put out water vapor and CO2. So CO2 has to be the villain. Oh, CO2 is going to kill us all. Well, if it wasn't for CO2, none of us would be here. None of us. This would be a dead planet without carbon dioxide. And the idea that there can be some sort of runaway CO2 disaster in the Earth's atmosphere is a hoax. It's absolutely a hoax. Well, what about Venus? Oh, well, Venus is hundreds of millions of miles closer to the sun than Earth, and it's a completely different chemistry. And what the hell are you pointing at? It's not going to happen here. Never will, never has, or we wouldn't be here. And to somehow think that cows are going to be a problem when there are runaway old tire farms on fire all over the world is just preposterous. It's absolutely preposterous. But because that is the latest political tool designed to extract tax money from us and try to extract the willingness to defend our Constitution and Bill of Rights, that's why politicians are indeed pursuing it. So again, what I'm trying to find out, is there any place in America or the world where politics has made things better? All right. That being said, Target stores are sinking fast because they decided to play politics and essentially blame their own customer base for not going along with their politics. This is from Fox News, so it's biased. This is a Fox News investigative piece, so understand this is going to be solely pushed at proving a point, but it's worthy of your consideration under the context I just described. Since the George Floyd protests and riots of 2020, Target Corporation said it ramped up diversity, equity, and inclusion. This agenda extended far beyond enhancing representation in support of historically marginalized groups. Externally and in its stores, dipped into funding organizations with far left and blatantly political agendas. Target's accelerated DEI program was in response to Black Lives Matter activism under the leadership of its diversity chief, Kiara Fernandez. The chief demanded that white women get to work to combat the proclaimed systemic racism in America. By the way, systemic racism, if you hate systemic racism, then demand that our country stop pursuing it as, yes, a political tool. Remember what I was talking about? Sometimes you bait the bulldog by explaining that something isn't real, something didn't happen. So people say, what do you mean it didn't happen? Especially in a circumstance where nobody really should have any kind of trust for this government. Why are you in a situation where you are now looking at this and saying, well, systemic racism is horrible and terrible in the United States? The number one practicer, if you want to say it that way, of systemic racism is the United States government. And why? Because of politics. I mean, if you don't think systemic racism is anything good for society, then stop practicing it as a matter of government policy. Stop it. It seems simple to me. Maybe I'm just nuts. It's possible. It's possible that I'm nuts. It's possible. So Fox News, in its investigative report, found that Target, via its nonprofit organization, which had been directed by the retail giant's senior corporate treasurers, funded a grantee pushing to shut down and give away U.S. sovereign land like Mount Rushmore, believing it to be an international symbol of white supremacy, and to demilitarize the violent U.S. military. That same grantee also supports the destruction of Israel's Jewish character through what it's called the Palestinian Law of Return, and implementing economic warfare tactics against the Jewish state, such as boycotts and sanctions, to free Palestine. Yeah. So when you look at that particular part of the land, I have to put this over here. When you look at that particular part of the world, Israel, Palestine, so on and so forth, do you want more Israel or do you want more Palestine? I think it's simple to me. Again, this is simple and I might be crazy, but under the current circumstances, I think I want more Israel. And until Palestine finds moral high ground, it will always be that way. More about that coming up later on in this edition of the Wells Report. Something fascinating that I ran across this morning. But so stick around. Free Palestine. From what? We need to free Palestine from the people running Palestine. Another Target Foundation grantee said that parents must teach specifically white children about systemic racism to see color. Can anybody see the hypocrisy? Yeah, the only person with racist tendencies are white people. That's racism. Hello? That's prejudging someone based on the color of their skin. That's racism. It's a crime against humanity. So why would you practice one crime against humanity to protest another crime against humanity? Because you're nuts. That's all there is to it. Two wrongs do not make a right. So stop. Stop encouraging aggrievement based on something that is basically uncontrollable. And that, by the way, is a small minority of people that practice this. It's a very, very small minority of people. It's about 25,000 people in the United States that argue for all of this. The rest of us are sitting here going, what are you guys talking about? I got to get to work. Exactly. That's the vast majority. The people of the United States left racism behind, as they should have, decades ago. So why in heaven's name are we pursuing it as a matter of national import? Well, because it's not a matter of national import, it's a matter of political import. That's why they call it cynically political science. Are you out of your mind? So now, as everyone goes through and takes a look at what's going on with Target stores, they now find that they're backing organizations that want to destroy America. Well, it's not actually an American corporation. I believe the Target came from France. We're from France. So now what we have is we have an entire gigantic corporation employing thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people across the country, auguring in because of their politics. I don't know that Target is ever going to, I don't know that Target is going to survive this. I don't even know whether they should. The people of the United States are pretty straightforward. The politics of the United States are certainly not. The people of the United States are rejecting these ideas of the left because they're antithetical to the American experience by choice and by design. Most people like the United States of America. Most people like the precepts outlined in the Constitution and founding documents of this nation and have been following them for 2.5 centuries. All of these people that are arguing for a different kind of America are arguing for Venezuela. How's that working out? Not well. Not well. So now, Target, having lost tens of millions of dollars in market wealth, now looks at squarely down the barrel of its own demise based on its willingness to impose its political views on others. Do you do that too? How many friends have you lost because they didn't agree with your politics? Too many. Too many. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Fred Teed is a friend of mine. He's a friend of mine. He says it quite simply. People who practice politics instead of reality are asinine. Goodness gracious. Don't look at the elephant. See how many people look at the elephant. There you go. That's Freddie. Yeah, this is the Wells Report. We'll be back with more coming up in just a moment. If I can. Let me play some music here. This is the Wells Report, which will return in 2 minutes. You're listening to The Wells Report, which will return in 1 minute. The Wells Report returns in 30 seconds. This is the Wells Report. John David Wells at your service. There's something else going on in this gigantic mess caused by, for all intents and purposes, the straw that broke the camel's back, which was an unfortunate and ill-advised advertising campaign by Anheuser-Busch regarding Bud Light. And we've been talking about it as it's been applied to Target stores, where all of this woke ideology is being, and politics are being foisted on the American people. And when customers disagree, the corporations themselves vilify their own customers. It's truly idiotic. It's like, people have forgotten that there's actually a business to be run. And that's why when people criticize capitalism, well, I sit there and go, well, you know what? Capitalism is human nature. That is simply the way it is. And what you have to do is you have to court human nature if you want a successful business. Court human nature if you want a successful business. And telling people that something is plainly true when it is plainly not, and then blaming your customer base for not going along with your emperor's new clothes ideology equals ruin. And Bud Light is the latest proof. Bud Light salespeople are struggling. Customers are using car horns, middle fingers, and jokes to mock the company during the ongoing boycott. This, according to a recent report from ABC News. Many frontline Bud Light salespeople rely on commission. They're losing out on business as a result of the boycott. This has really, really killed a lot of guys who are commission-based. That's who's really hurting, said one supervisor to an ABC News reporter. Well, first of all, they're not killing guys. They're just hurting their bottom line, which is different. There's nothing these people could have done. This was thrown in their faces by a corporation playing politics. And as people do when they play politics, they put themselves in a position where people can vote. So far, the vast majority of Bud Light customers are voting no. Former Bud Light customers. 7 weeks have passed since Bud Light sales tanked after it was revealed the company partnered with Dylan Mulvaney, a transgender influencer. Some stores have been forced to sell Bud Light for free, which is not selling, it's giving it away. Other Bud Light distributors are buying back unsold expired beer from wholesalers. This according to the Wall Street Journal. Boycott is now causing pain all the way down the supply chain. Sales supervisors, distributors for Bud Light are telling ABC News. Good people are going to start leaving because they aren't making any money. Yeah. Bad for business, huh? Yeah. A lot of people at Target stores are questioning why they're a part of Target stores. Why am I working here? And that's one of the great things about where I work now is my day job. I'm working at Defender Outdoors, which is a gun training center, retail store, and firing range. We have a great culture there. We absolutely do. We like each other. We know why we're there. We enjoy it. And that's not what you can say about Target stores or these people that work for Anheuser-Busch through distributorships and so on and so on. You see, and then this is actually against the law. Corporate law in the United States says that you are beholden to your stockholders as a fiduciary to do the very best you can for the company and its stock price. How's that being discharged by the current leadership of Anheuser-Busch? The answer is not well. Not well. Anheuser-Busch InBev CEO Michael Doukeris also reportedly spoke directly to the difficulty that is the boycott against Bud Light and what it's causing its frontline employees. The situation has impacted our people, especially our frontline workers. The delivery drivers, sales representatives, wholesalers, Bud owners, and servers. Yeah, they're being flipped off. They're being joked at. They're being mocked. Let's keep something in mind here, can we, please? These people are doing their jobs. They didn't have anything to do with the decision-making of Anheuser-Busch management. So the best thing you can do is what's being done. Simply stop. It may be the first shot in the nothing revolution. If something displeases you, don't have anything to do with it. In other words, do nothing. Nobody's buying Bud Light. They're doing nothing. Not Bud Light, the people. They're just not having anything to do with it. There's power in nothing. We should remember that, don't you think? This is the Wells Report, back with hour number 2 in a moment. Hey, thanks for being with us. Thank you so much for everything. And by the way, we'll be back with hour number 2, just like I said, in just a sec. Thanks for listening to the Wells Report, more of which continues in 6 minutes. You found the Wells Report, more of which continues in 5 minutes. You're listening to The Wells Report, which will be back in 4 minutes. This is The Wells Report, which will return in 3 minutes. This is The Wells Report, which will return in 2 minutes. You're listening to The Wells Report, which will return in 1 minute. The Wells Report returns in 30 seconds. North to south, coast to coast, around the world. This is The Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. What do? We report the news honestly and fairly. We analyze the news for fact and bias. We point out both. We make commentary, which is not news. It is simple opinion, yours and mine. And so we debate. You can do that several different ways. You can call 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. You can join us on our chat room, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch. And by the way, if you happen to live in the Denver area and elsewhere, you might be able to find us on something called, I think it's TV.com. We just added some new stuff, and I'll hear from my executive producer, the great Dirk Steele, a little bit later on, as to see whether or not that's working. We're trying to expand our horizons here, and hopefully that horizon will bring new people to the Wells Report. And if you, by the way, think there's any value in this show, by all means, do your best to bring new folks in. I, in my life, have been an observer, a reporter, and a commentator on all manner of things America for most of my life. Different ways of doing it, but now and since 2001, the 9/11 attacks, I've been doing news. And I have discovered a few things that I've shared with you. One of them is the difference between progressives and Democrats. The left wing of the Democrat Party is essentially the tail wagging the dog. And I have always drawn a comparison between those leftists running the Democrat Party and real Democrats out in the real world. Now, what I'm about to show you, I think best exemplifies a Democrat Party that has been subdued, maybe even oppressed by these leftist crazy people that have used the Democrat Party as essentially their own silly idea about where America should go and what it should be doing. And I assure you that that is not a long-term proposition. But here's a Democrat. Here's a Democrat. I want you to listen very closely to what this Democrat says. Who is it? It's RFK Jr. Here's a guy who has been a Democrat his entire life, has come from a Democrat family, a dynasty, in fact, who is now talking about the Democrat Party, not the one that everybody else talks about, but the real Democrat Party. I want you to listen very closely to this, especially if you happen to be a member of the Democrat Party.
Question from Dale Anderson, and Dale asked, how can we make ourselves, our country, with all the division that we have, how can we make our country and our people proud to be American today? And that is a wonderful question. I grew up so proud of the United States of America, and we thought it was the best country in the world. We were an exemplary nation. We were a nation of moral authority around the world. We were beloved by people in every nation in the world. And I want my children to have that same pride and that same love for our country. And the knowledge that we've created in America where our children can enjoy the same opportunities for dignity and enrichment and prosperity and good health as the communities that our parents gave us. And the way that we start that process is start telling the truth to Americans and make our government. The reason people don't trust our government today is because our government is no longer trustworthy and the media is no longer trustworthy. And we have to fix those institutions and fix and fortify all the institutions of our democracy. We need to end the warfare state, bring home that money and those resources, and start rebuilding this country as the exemplary nation around the world. We can't control the world, and we certainly cannot control the world using violence. Nobody wants that. And it's not making us safer. It's not making us more prosperous. And it's not making us any more in love with our country. We need to make sure that everything that we do in government is meant to make our country stronger, to make our people more prosperous, to build the middle class in this country, and to strengthen our democratic institutions. And that's what I'm going to do as your president. You know, when a parent is lying to you, all the children in the household are going to be at each other's throats. And one of the best ways for us to stop the division is to have a government that's giving us facts that we can all rely on, that we can all agree to. So let's start there. Let's start by cleaning up our side of the street, and then we're going to see all the good things that happen.
All right. If you're a Democrat, I want you to answer a very simple question. What's wrong with that? What is wrong with what RFK Jr. just talked about? What's wrong with it? I want you to answer. I don't want you to just sit there and be perplexed, because that's a real Democrat. That's not some leftist, crazy anti-American person. This is somebody who's calling out crazy anti-American persons who are in power. Because I can't think of anything that's wrong with that statement, because I grew up in a country that I loved and cherished. And by the way, I still live in a country that I love and cherish. Do you believe the current Democrat leadership in the United States of America loves and cherishes this nation? Yes or no? Yes or no? And tell me why you believe that. 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. If you're a Democrat, I want you to tell me what's wrong with that. Is there anything wrong with that? Somebody said, well, it's funny, a Kennedy talking about moral authority. Remember Marilyn Monroe? Okay. Do you remember that what happens between consenting adults in privacy is none of your business? And by the way, I've been consistent on that. Remember, I didn't have any problem with Bill Clinton and his dalliance with Monica Lewinsky at all, right up until he lied about it in federal court. Is it because I am just an amoral libertine? No, not at all. Not at all. It's because it's none of my business. It only became my business when the President of the United States lied in federal court about it. Then it became my business. Speaking of lying in federal court, has that happened recently? I'm digressing. If you're a Democrat, if you are a Democrat, I want you to tell me what's wrong with what Robert F. Kennedy Jr. just said. Struggling? That's the real Democrat Party. That's the real Democrat Party. Here's a Democrat who said recently a former president lied about a check to Stormy Daniels. Again, that's none of our business. It's none of our business. True, not true, moral, not moral. It's none of our business. Nothing is wrong with this statement. He also said we should tell the truth about the country. No, he said the government should tell the American people the truth. Is the American government telling people the truth? Yes or no? There's another article here that involves this man. And I think this is one of those things that is truly unfortunate, because this particular article comes to you from the Washington Post, which is hardly a conservative outlet, and you'll see the bias in this immediately. The headline from the Washington Post: Robert F. Kennedy Jr. tests the conspiratorial appetite of Democrats. One of the most famous living descendants of the most famous American political dynasty shows early strength against Biden in polls. That's the subheadline. Robert F. Kennedy Jr., a candidate for president supported by 1 in 5 Democrat voters, that's 20%. Campaigns on the idea that powerful people have been working in secret to deceive you. Is that a conspiracy? Is that conspiratorial? Or is that truth? He began a recent speech by recounting the Eisenhower administration's 1960 decision to lie when the Soviets downed an American spy plane by calling it weather research. Then came further alleged deceptions, some proven, some refuted, many just conjecture. See what he's doing? See what they're doing there? Now they have a problem. They're taking on a Kennedy. They are taking on a Kennedy, and of course, there are two basic factions of the Kennedy family. The conservative Democrats of, say, for example, John F. Kennedy, Ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. And Teddy Kennedy, who said the government should do everything for everybody, and forgetting the fact that when a government is so large that it does everything for you, it can take anything from you anytime it chooses, which, by the way, we've seen again, unfortunately, surrounding the Bill of Rights. Again, is that conspiratorial? Yes or no? Before long, Kennedy was arguing that a 2019 tabletop exercise about a mock pandemic archived on YouTube actually revealed a secret plan involving U.S. spy masters to enrich drug companies and suppress free speech. Again, is that conspiracy or is that believable and probably true? Again, I'm just asking. I'm not playing the conspiracy game. I'm playing the fact game. He then rattled off clinical data from a coronavirus vaccine trial that was not designed to measure mortality, falsely suggesting clear evidence that vaccine killed more people than they saved. That's not true. Vaccines have saved far more people than they've killed. Have they killed people? Yes. Is it worthy of our concern? Absolutely. But vaccination has done more to keep Americans and people around the world alive, far more than it has ever damaged. Now, that's easy to say. My children were all vaccinated. I myself am vaccinated. And is it going to do me in? Maybe. Would I do it again? Yes. And I got to be honest with you. You know, I took those COVID shots because I wanted you to actually have access to somebody who took the COVID shots and would report honestly about what happened. I took the COVID shots, had no ill effects, at least up to now. And I got COVID twice. So did the vaccinations work? Not for me. Because vaccinations, but they have saved me from tetanus and diphtheria and measles and the flu and a lot of other things. So we find ourselves in a position where Robert F. Kennedy does make mistakes and his past will haunt him. But the idea that the government is conspiring to not tell us the truth, is that true or not? You tell me. 817-379-2172, 817-379-2172. The chat room, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, elsewhere. If you're watching on Rumble and Patreon, this was recorded earlier. Give me an email, thewellsreport@frontier.com. Back with more in a moment. This is the Wells Report, which will return in 2 minutes. You're listening to The Wells Report, which will return in 1 minute. The Wells Report returns in 30 seconds. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Thanks very much for being a part of our broadcast. Telephone number is 817-379-2172. Joining me is my brother-in-law, Bob Frame. Bobby, welcome to the show. Good to have you here.
How you doing, John David?
I'm hanging in there, brother. Working really, really hard. I have I've learned that the radio stations I used to work at provided a whole lot of infrastructure that I don't have and I'm working on and trying to learn. I'm learning like 5 different job titles, and it's hard. How about you? What's going on? How's everything?
Everything's fine. Just business home here in Centerville. Taking it easy.
Centerville, Texas. That's a nice spot. Talk to me a little bit about what you've been hearing us talk about, Bob. Tell me about RFK and tell me about real Democrats versus progressives. Tell me what you hear.
Okay. Well, I'm a Republican. And I believe the government lies to me every day, out of both sides of their damn mouth.
Yeah.
They just, they're out. I think they love their country, but they're out for what they can get. They
Go ahead.
I just think that the government needs to have term limits.
Yeah.
And get some of these guys who's been there forever out.
Let me ask you this question. Has it gone so far that it's going to be tough to get it back?
Yes.
How do you think that's going to happen? How do you think, because the American people aren't going to put up with this. I mean,
it's going to have term limits. I think it's going to have new people. It's going to have people who are honest and people we can trust. I don't trust nobody in government.
Yeah. That's really sad. That's really, really sad. Is that the way it always has been, or is this something new?
No. Well, I don't think it's new, but that's not the way it's always been.
Yeah.
I've trusted my government for years. I served in the United States Army. I was a policeman for 38 years, and I just don't believe anything that comes out of my government anymore.
Yeah. Bob, thanks very much. I'll give you a buzz after the show, but thanks so much for giving us a call, huh?
Okay, man. Take it easy.
Take care. So that's my brother-in-law. He's a Texas lawman. He is an amazing human being. And he doesn't trust his government anymore. Anecdotal. That's one man's opinion. But is it yours? RFK is putting this stuff out there, and he is tackling this stuff head on. Is it easy to listen to? No. Is it being characterized by the Washington Post as something conspiratorial? Yes. But is it? Is it? A 2019 tabletop exercise about a mock pandemic archived on YouTube that actually revealed a secret plan, including U.S. spy masters, John Brennan, enriched drug companies, Pfizer, and suppress free speech. Everything that happened during the COVID pandemic era. That suppressed free speech. It still does. This broadcast has been censored on many of the platforms that are now realizing the magnitude of that error. Not because I was spreading misinformation, but because the information I was spreading was antithetical to their political standing. By the way, Meta, and I don't know whether Alphabet, which owns Google, I don't know whether they've seen the light yet, but I haven't been censored lately. And it was really interesting. They censored me for 2 weeks. They said they were going to censor me for 2 weeks based on something I said about the 2020 election. And then I started talking about how that was censorship, and suddenly that suspension was lifted. Are they paying attention? I don't know. But free speech. Robert Kennedy isn't hurting us. He's helping us. More about that coming up in just a couple of moments. You're listening to The Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. I want to thank you very much for being with us today on this 5th day of June, year of our Lord 2023. You're listening to The Wells Report, which will be back in 4 minutes. This is The Wells Report, which will return in 3 minutes. This is The Wells Report, which will return in 2 minutes. You're listening to The Wells Report, which will return in 1 minute. The Wells Report returns in 30 seconds. News, analysis, commentary, debate. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Thank you very much for being with us today. I appreciate you and the fact that you would lend me your ears. Let's see. Fred says we're way over the trust hump when it comes to the American government. I don't know how long it's going to take for the American government to regain the trust of the American people. All I know is that it is going to take all of us, not the Republican Party, not the Democrat Party, not conservatives, not liberals, all of us. Progressives, I don't care what they think. They hate America. They want to change it into their own political playground. Okay. That will fail. Even if they're successful, quote unquote successful, it'll fail because it always does. People don't like being told what to do by their supposed betters. That's just not the thing. So Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is coming out and talking about a lot of things. The Washington Post trying to dampen that standpoint. And they have a real problem because they're taking on the Kennedys. And the Kennedys at one time inspired a nation to go to the moon. It wasn't a miracle. We just decided to go. And we did. And we will again. And so Robert F. Kennedy telling as described in this insanely biased article by the Washington Post, we were lied to by the government and by the media. Do you agree? Yes or no? Have we been lied to by the government and the media? Yes or no? And tell me why. The actual article goes like this. We were lied to by the government and by the media. Arguably true. And then they say this. He said that to a well-heeled crowd of hundreds of political skeptics at the Meridian Hills Country Club, many dressed in spring pastels or sockless shoes, some with wine glasses in hand. Why would you describe it that way? The only thing you need to say is that he told a crowd of hundreds of political skeptics. Are you a political skeptic? I sure as hell am. Yeah, I'm a political skeptic. Political skepticism built this nation. What's wrong with that? And then RFK said this. We were lied to by the government and the media, and it was all so confusing because they keep us confused. Are you confused? Yeah, you are. You may deny it, but believe me, you are confused because that is the political imperative. I could not run except in this election. And really, COVID integrated and systemized a deception in ways that are beyond the experience of our country. People want the truth. Correct. It's a message that has so far allowed Kennedy, 69 years of age, to become President Biden's most surprising and successful competitor in the 6 weeks since announcing his campaign. With only 38% of Democrat voters wanting to see the president as their nominee, Kennedy has polled about as high in the National Democrat Party as Florida Governor Ron DeSantis is polling in the Republican one, except a fraction of the media, with a fraction of the media and little paid advertising. That's interesting. You know, realistic truth advertises itself. You know, I've said this over and over and over again. You don't have to sell the truth, but you sure do have to sell a lie. Have you been sold lies recently by the media and the government? Yes or no, and why? Tell me. 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. Kennedy's campaign, according to the Washington Post, aims to embrace the spirit of his family's 1960 and 1968 campaigns, hoping to reunite the working class, white supporters of former President Donald Trump with the Black and Hispanic coalition of Democrats that once rallied behind the Kennedy name. He argues current national polling does not yet account for the shifts he can bring to people who vote in open Democrat primaries. An independent group, American Values 2024, has already raised $5.7 million to support his campaign. This, according to John Gilmore, the founder of the group. This has been a vertical takeoff, said former Democrat Ohio Representative Dennis Kucinich, who is the campaign manager for RFK Jr. He peaked in the single digits as a presidential contender in 2008. The Washington Post says that in an obvious bias, as they try to convince you that this is a long shot campaign and that the people running it really had limited success themselves. Mr. Kennedy arrived at a moment of seismic shift in American politics. He is singularly situated to be able to reset the pointer of our national dialogue to the center. Yeah, that's a good statement by Dennis Kucinich. And by the way, what's fascinating about this country being a self-correcting mechanism, isn't it fascinating that the right human being showed up at the right time for the success of this nation? I'm not saying that RFK Jr. is the right guy. What I'm saying is RFK Jr. is representing a Democrat Party that we haven't heard from in decades. The real Democrat Party, in my view. Now, what's the problem with all of this? What's the problem with all of this? Here it is. RFK Jr.'s, anger against the vaccine community and people like that, that's going to hurt him in this. It damages his credibility. But to be perfectly honest with you, what doesn't damage his credibility is the fact that he's actually coming out and talking about things that all of us deal with every day. And also, this gets back to the right guy showing up at the right time with the right message. Now, I'm not saying it's right. I need to hear more. But what's going to damage RFK Jr.'s chances in this isn't necessarily his controversial attitudes about some subjects. What's going to damage RFK Jr.'s campaign, perhaps beyond recovery, is the damage that has been done to the Democrat Party at large by leftist, progressive, anti-American, socialist fascists. And that's the current leadership of the Democrat Party and the mainstream media. The Washington Post is doing it right now, poo-pooing the idea that RFK Jr. has a chance. He has a chance. A big one. Who else do you have? You have this cartoon character of a California governor. Who else? Who else is out there? No one. No one except a guy who is actually saying, I think my brothers were killed by the government. Do you think that the government killed his brothers? Yes or no? Do you think that what he's talking about is conspiracy theory, as the Washington Post puts out there and says, the Washington Post, they say, well, he's testing the limits of conspiracy theorists in the Democrat Party. These aren't conspiracies. The government does lie to us. The executive branch agencies have abandoned the Constitution of the United States and the Bill of Rights for the sake of politics. This is not debatable. This is the current climate that we deal with in the United States of America. And yet they're trying to turn this into some crazy raving of some old guy. But they're going to have a real problem doing that. But the damage done to the Democrat Party at large may keep him from moving forward in this. The Democrat Party doesn't have anybody else. They don't have a serious candidate. Not even the President of the United States is a serious candidate. No one believes, Democrat or Republican, that Joe Biden has a chance to continue being the President of the United States. He will go down in flames in the 2024 election. And then they're going to have to explain how it is that a guy got 81 million votes in 2020 and very likely doesn't survive the primary season of the 2024 election. I don't think I'm talking about political survival, although actual survival is up for grabs. Mr. Love 825 says, JD, the Democrat Party has always saved America from right-wing harmful policies. Really? Are you saying that Ronald Reagan was a Democrat? Are you saying that the people of the United States rejected the perfect political ideology of Jimmy Carter in favor of a Republican? Are you saying that what happened during the Carter administration was good for the nation? I think you might have a problem. And then, of course, Mr. Love says, another JD prediction? Okay. I've made predictions that were wrong. A couple. But I'm not making a prediction here. You're missing the point. Is it willful? Is it willful that you're missing my point? There are two Democrat parties. One that seeks to ruin the United States. And then there's the Democrat Party afraid to speak because they'll get stomped on by their friends and by their fellow Democrats. Represented by RFK Jr., who, by the way, is too big to stomp on. Oh, you can minimize him in some way. You can do that. Well, that was before my time. Okay. It was before your time, but then again, so was the Constitution. Should we abandon that too? All I'm trying to tell you is that RFK is not testing conspiratorial limits of the Democrat Party. He's reporting the truth. The government does lie. The media backs up the lies. We are being kept confused as a matter of political imperative. A tabletop exercise in 2019 about a health pandemic actually did occur. It actually involved the same people that ran their mouths, for example, the 51 supposed intelligence officers that said that the Hunter Biden laptop was nothing more than Russian disinformation. If those guys were running America's intelligence apparatus and law enforcement capabilities, if those guys were actually running it, no wonder we have a law enforcement capacity and an American intelligence industry, if you will, that is untrustable. Absolutely untrustable. I get your point. The same can be said about the Republican Party. The hard right has damaged the Republican Party. You need real Republicans like Liz and Christie. He's talking about Liz Cheney. Really? Has Liz Cheney sought to forward the American experience? Or essentially destroy someone who's forwarding the American experience? Like it or not, Donald Trump did great things for this nation. Like it or not, he did. Period. Arguing the point that what he did was unnecessary. Arguing the point that Republicans, as usual, replacing Donald Trump or someone like him, is better for the country, it's completely wrong. Donald Trump is not a politician. Ron DeSantis is. Chris Christie is. Is the problem politics? Or is the problem Donald Trump and people who reject politics in toto? Politics is destroying this nation. Absolutely destroying it. And as we go on this road, as we continue to follow this American experience, the depth and breadth of those people who are doing their dead level best to change this country into a political playground for the sake of their own aggrandizement and power is made plain and will be made more plain. You see the left losing with all of their, cockamamie ideologies about gender and the celebration of the odd and outside. They're losing. People are disillusioned. So RFK Jr. represents a completely different path for the Democrat Party. I wonder if anybody's paying attention. That's what I put in my text. Democrats, are you listening? So are you? My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172. Perplexing, no? John David Wells talking about a Democrat. A real Democrat. An American. Not a leftist progressive. I wonder if America is listening. This is the Wells Report. Back with more in a moment. This is the Wells Report, which will return in 2 minutes. You're listening to the Wells Report, which will return in 1 minute. The Wells Report returns in 30 seconds. This is me talking into a microphone whose volume was turned down. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Speaking of new voices, Nikki Haley made a primetime pitch yesterday for her presidential campaign by stressing she has both domestic and foreign policy experience. She does. And is much younger than Donald Trump and Joe Biden to boot. True. It is time for a new It is time for a new generational leader, the 51-year-old former South Carolina governor and the United Nations ambassador said during a CNN town hall in Des Moines, Iowa. It is time for us to leave the baggage of the past. Haley trails Trump and Ron DeSantis in current Republican polling. She rarely is referred to either of them by name during her talk with Iowa voters. Instead, she promoted a litany of Republican issues: cut federal spending, reduce inflation, close the southern border, oppose gun control, while echoing several themes she hopes to use to climb the primary ladder. Let's see. Let's talk about this so-called litany of Republican issues. Okay. Cut federal spending. Have Republicans cut federal spending? Reduce inflation. Have they reduced inflation or contributed to it? Closing the southern border. The Republican Party has had all that it needs to close the southern border for decades. What makes her any different than any other Republican president except for Donald Trump, who actually did something about it? Speaking of that, reducing inflation. How do you reduce inflation in the United States in this particular time frame? Do you do it by hurting the economy so that people hire less and make less money and do that? Yeah, it handles inflation all right. But there's a better way. What is that? Harvest American energy. Does she say that? No. She opposes gun control. Really? Then how come we have gun control? Haley said that she would support whoever the Republicans nominate for president, although she expects it to be herself. I don't play for second. I like that moxie. Haley drew distinctions with the former president only when asked, and then sought to portray him as a part of the baggage the nation should leave behind. There's something else about this current rhetoric being thrown out by Republicans that I think is worthy of your attention. In all of this Iowa campaigning by Republican candidates, they talk about the successes of the Republican Party during the Trump era. They don't mention Trump by name. Also, during the Trump era, were those Republican successes or were they President Trump successes? Because near as I could tell, the Republican Party was fighting almost as hard against President Trump as the Democrat Party. How is she going to stop that? How is she going to stop the Republican Party from enabling Democrat policies, leftist progressive policies? How's she going to stop it? She can't. She can't. And by the way, there's a great example in the Republican Party, Jeff Sessions. Jeff Sessions was an early devotee of Donald Trump. Donald Trump appointed him as Attorney General of the United States, but when it came time to fight for the President of the United States as the Attorney General of the United States, he abdicated his responsibilities. That's what politicians do. When political pressure becomes too intense, they retreat. Does that apply to Chris Christie? Yeah. It doesn't apply to Ron DeSantis. Ron DeSantis hasn't retreated yet. Nikki Haley. Is she going to retreat? I don't know. Do we need to vote for people that we don't know about? Do we need to, I was talking about what has damaged the Democrat Party brand. What has damaged the Republican brand? They talk. They don't do. So if you're voting for a Republican for president of the United States, do you base it on what they say or what they do or what they have done. That litmus test points again to Ron DeSantis. He's done a lot. He's fought a lot. He's tough. But is he a politician? You bet. He is a politician, first, last, and always. By the way, John David, did you read Kennedy's book, RFK's book? No, I didn't read RFK's book. Probably won't. Why won't I read RFK's book? Well, because I'm interested in what he's saying now. What he said in the past is going to damage him. But I want to hear what he has to say now. And moreover, to sort of call back something that Fred said earlier, I want to see how people react to what RFK Jr. says. It's not the elephant that they're looking at. You don't care about looking at the elephant. You want to see the people who are looking at the elephant. Yeah, okay. No, I'm interested in the here and now. The frozen thoughts of somebody making mistakes doesn't interest me. I want to know what he says now. I want to find out what he's going, where he's going. And moreover, I also want to say, and I also want to hear and see what he does. This has been the Wells Report. I hope you've enjoyed it. We'll be back again tomorrow with another edition of this broadcast. Until then, God bless you. Okie dokie. By the way, I want to thank the people in the chat room for having a better day today. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. That's the kind of discourse we're looking for. We're not looking for arguments. We're looking for discourse. Polite. And constructive. So that happened more today, and I appreciate it. God bless all you.